Let's just go for 1 billion. Let's see what we can do.
It sounds like, yeah, it sounds like you should have no problem hitting that billion then. So, hey, why not? I love that. Shoot for the stars. So I'm going to read a quick bio here, but Chris Do is an Emmy Award-winning designer, director, and entrepreneur. He spent the last 2 decades running his Santa Monica-based agency called Blind. His team has worked on TV commercials and music videos for iconic brands such as Nike, Xbox, Fox Sports, Sony, Honda, and so many more. He's also founded The Future, which is what we were just mentioning about helping 1 billion people, an online content and education platform, like he mentioned, with over 2 million subscribers now on YouTube. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Wow, Krista, how did you?
All right, so Kate.
Yes, so Krista, how did you ended up with that billion people? How did you ended up your big hair or Daisy's goal? What's the story behind it?
The story was we were in a moment of transition between being a service design company and an education company. And we're sitting together, my managers, we're sitting around a room, and we're getting into one of the many heated discussions and debates that we usually have. And there's a lot of confusion because most of them are coming from the service side. So the whole idea of making products and teaching people is actually a foreign concept. And we get into this argument like, are we selling courses? Are we trying to get sponsorship? Are we making videos and commercials? What are we doing? And I had to step back and say, hold on, everybody, just hit reset. Here's the thing. If we're successful in our mission as an education company, and I'm looking at one of my guys, his name is Ben Burns. I'm looking at him in the eyes and said, your daughters, when they grow up, when they're 18 years old, they're going to have a viable alternative to going to a private art school or private design school or the future. Like my kids are too old. It's too late for them. But I think if we do this right, we will be able to accomplish this without any penalty to the student at a fraction of the cost of what it's going to take to go to a private art school. To put this in context, currently today, tuition for 1 semester at a private art school, a reputable one, is about $22,000 a semester. $22,000 a semester. So that means when you get out 8 semesters later, you're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $160,000 to $200,000 in debt, and that's how you're going to start your professional life. That's ridiculous to me. And we want to do it so that you can buy every single thing that we make, every course, every service, every membership, every support group for less than what it costs to go to 1 semester at school. And when I said that to him, he's a big guy. He's burly. He's a former army person, former police officer, a narcotics officer. He started to tear up a little bit. He said, my daughters, that's what we're doing this, right? I said, yeah. So that night I went home and I thought about how do I tell this story so it's short and succinct because this is too much context. And so for whatever reason, next morning it comes to me and I'm like, you know what? We need to teach 1 billion people how to make money doing what they love. And I messaged it over to Ben. Ben's like, I love this. This is it. And shortly thereafter, I revised it because I don't want it to be about just making money. And that's why I said I want to teach 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love. So each person can get to decide what it means to them to make a living. Your own definition of success, not necessarily monetarily, but I think that's a part of it. And like I said, 1 billion is 1 in 8 people. And I like Daniel's confidence. And, I may not be able to do that in one lifetime. I recognize that. But I'm really confident that whatever happens, whoever inherits the company, whoever is the successor, can take the idea and continue pushing forward.
Wow. I love that. Now, Krista, I gotta say, your hat it says God is a designer. So tell me, how did you come up with that?
Okay, so full confession, it's not my idea. It's not my company. One of my friends in the Future Pro group, his name is, this is for real, his name is Angel Acevedo. And Angel's a born-again Christian. And Angel says, Chris, I really appreciate everything you've done, man. And if you ever meet Angel, he's the sweetest, kindest, most generous person. And he says, can I send you something? I said, look, no promises. You can send me whatever you want. It doesn't mean I'm going to use it. I'm going to talk about it, whatever. So I opened up the box, the hat, a very lovely note from him. And I see that it's in Helvetica, it's justified left. And it says God is a designer. So it already has a lot of things I love. So I told Angel, I'm going to wear this hat. I was raised Catholic. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I'm going to wear the hat. I want to support you, brother. And by wearing the hat and being on the channel, he starts getting interest on an idea that he's lived with for 10 years, but hasn't really taken off. And so now, because I wear it so often, people associate me with the hat and the concept and the company, but it is Angel Acevedo. It's his company.
Wow. For some reason, when I'm reading your hat, it kind of reminds me of that old philosopher. Is that Nietzsche? Like God is dead. Like that kind of reminds me. Is that Nietzsche? Is that how you say his name? But for some reason, it's just all of a sudden it just popped. Like, because I know you're so creative. So everything that you do, it's just so creative. So I want to know the backstory, just like your company name. Sure. Can you tell everyone about how did you ended up that name?
Yeah, sure. Whenever you start any business, whether it's your design service company or an education company, coming up with a name is really hard. If you're not using your first and last name and partners and associates, it is really difficult. And I think that's why people default to that, like Doe and Company or Johnson and Doe or whatever it is you want to do, right? And I'm struggling, and I have a list of names. It's probably a couple hundred names long. My former business partner and I, we were running another company called The School. We broke up after 2.5 years of running the company together. Just differences in management styles. We're still friends, but it didn't work for us. And I'm like, God, I just have all these names. And everywhere I'd go, I'd read off 10, 15, 20 names to my wife. My wife, born and raised in Taiwan, she is brutal with the feedback. She's like, nope, dumb, stupid, I hate it. Keep going, keep trying. I'm like, I'm running out of ideas here. And because emotions were still a little sensitive and frayed between my former business partner and I, Jose, we were kind of talking at each other through the internet. It's kind of like internet beef, and we're just like talking back and forth because we have this shared community. And he goes on this rant. He writes this post, I think in reaction to some of my ideas. And he writes in there, the 21st century is going to be a place for right-brain thinkers. And he's like, in the future, this is going to happen. And it won't be like this anymore in the future. And he keeps writing. He's kind of angry. And I'm reading. I'm like, oh, the future? So you're saying in the future this will happen. So why don't we just call our company The Future? You're writing about us right now. And I tried to register future.com. Couldn't get it, of course. And try all kinds of combinations. The thing that we could get was The Future is here, but we had to remove the E off the future because every version of this is taken. Now, luckily, later on, we were able to get the future.com. And then over time, people were like, Chris, what happened to the E? Where did the E go? I said, we dropped it. We dropped the ego. That's why it's called Future without an E.
I love it. Now, do you remember some of the names that didn't make it from your wife's category and her choices? Do you remember?
I'm going to take the fifth on this. They're kind of embarrassing. Let me just tell you. You just come, like we would drive down the street and I would say Santa Monica, Pacific Palace. I would just say whatever street or anything I saw, mailbox, anything I can think of, I would just say, and those are the kind of the names. Yeah, I don't have that list anymore, unfortunately.
Well, you select the best one. Now, Chris, I've seen you're so consistent on Clubhouse. How is it working for you? And your message, does that help you grow with your Instagram followers and YouTube? I've never seen someone that's so consistent. But by the way, you're one of the smartest and the real expert in Clubhouse. I gotta give you that.
Oh, thank you so much. You're too kind. I'm in a strange long-term relationship with Clubhouse. It started out hot, and everything was good, and we seemed to love each other. And then over time, like, I don't know, you don't always seem to be here for me anymore. So I'm still here. I'm still making content, but unfortunately, if any of the founders are listening, there's some major missteps here and just a lot of goodwill squandered, I have to say. And focusing on all the kinds of things I don't think that are important, but I'm in it for the long run. I'm a long-term player. I'm okay with delayed gratification. I'm not on here to grow on my social media channels. I know he said it. Yeah, it doesn't really matter to me. Like right now, I'm not trying to just throw this out to flaunt, but I have 600,000 followers on Instagram. Having another 100,000 isn't going to change my life at all. I don't even post that consistently. My YouTube channel is just doing fine. I'm really here because I love this idea that we can gather, have community, and have conversation in real time without a lot of technological things getting in the way. That's what I love about this platform. Everything else about it kind of sucks, I have to say, and I'm loyal. But I also think, as many people, and you know this, so many people have deserted the platform that there's a lot of room now. You know what I mean? Like everybody, like the rats.
600,000 daily.
How many?
600,000 daily.
That's how many they have now.
Mm-hmm.
Was it down from what, 11 million or something?
Well, it used to be
300,000.
300,000. The last time I did a research.
Are you sure?
600,000.
Okay, I'm going to write this down right now. So 600,000 active uniques, right? And in its height during March, like what were the active users on here? Do you remember?
I think it was that 10 plus? Dan?
10 million?
Yes.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
It's huge, right? So the thing that I know about tech companies is when the numbers go in the wrong direction and you can't reverse it, it is a bad, bad sign, because it's all about growth, adoption, and getting people developing addictive behaviors and habits, which many of us have because we're on here all the time. I get that. But there's so many things. My goodness. I wish, like, for example, I'll give you an example. This is the last rant. I'll go on, I promise.
We love your rant, by the way.
Thank you.
Feel the same way.
Okay. They just rolled out a new feature. You know, every time they update the app, I'm like, please, let today be the day. Spatial audio. Okay. I get it. So now somebody sounds like they're on my right or my left. But did that fundamentally change my experience as a creator? Did it make it better for me as a creator on this platform? And I'm going to say absolutely, absolutely not. What do I need? I need tools to build an audience. I need analytics so I know what's working. I need to know when people join, when people leave. And I have to use a third-party app to do that? Come on, guys. Focus where the importance is. Put your energy to the creators. Take some of that VC money, give it to creators, give it to 10, 12, 20 creators, and just support them. Don't make them jump through hoops and applications and forms. And it's like, are you kidding me? Bring the audience here, and the audience is going to come where the creators are. You know, Spotify's doing it. They're dumping a ton of money into superstar creators, getting them to make content exclusively on their platform. Why wouldn't you do that? I just don't understand.
Yeah, I have to say
that was a one big move when they were kind of
rolling
rolling
that
that
out
out and promising a lot of
community
community
builder.
builder.
And then
And
all
then
of a sudden,
10 people made it,
and
and it pissed off a lot of people. I think that's when the sudden drop of audience is just like a lot of people are pissed off.
Yep.
Yes, I remember this.
But anyway,
Wow.
I feel like we are like kind of talking like a, I don't know, Dan. It sounds like we are like Joe Rogan show right now, because I love to talk. You know when the green room open and then everyone's pissed off about Clubhouse and they're all talking about the Clubhouse and then they all move to green room and then it's back and forth and then green room disappear. It's actually very entertaining, but we all have the same rant.
So thank you for sharing for that.
Now, Chris, a lot
of
of people
kind of tend to confuse the branding and the marketing side of with our product or services. What is the difference between the two?
The difference between branding and marketing?
Yes.
Okay. I want to be very sensitive here because this could set off a whole bunch of people. I do want to say a couple of things. I think if you're in the business of helping companies grow, what you call it doesn't matter as much as the results that you get for your client. And so I think historically speaking, the two different divisions between branding and marketing, there was a very clear line in the sand. And branding has incorporated a lot of the concepts from marketing and vice versa. And so some people would define marketing as everything you do to get a customer, and branding is everything you do to keep a customer. And maybe I'll just leave it like that. But honestly, I'm not so vested in what titles you call something, labels, because it is a shortcut for people to know what it is that you do. But at the end of the day, if your company doesn't have customers, you have no brand. And if you sell something where you fall apart on the promise and the user experience, then you also have nothing. So you need those two things to work in unison. And whether you call yourself a marketing brand strategist or strategy brand marketer, it doesn't really matter. Just do the job. Help your clients, get customers, and keep them by building a great user experience.
Oh, love it. Thank you. Now, how can you build a disruptive brand, Chris? Can you? In like a short amount of time?
Yes. I think you can build a disruptive brand by creating a new type of customer. And so this is a strange concept to think you can actually create a customer, but the great business management guru, godfather, Peter Drucker, he talked about this, that a business has only one valid function, which is to create a customer. And the way that you create a customer is you find a new group of people who have yet not spoken about their unmet needs. You find them and you serve them. And there are a couple examples. I think the late Dr. Clayton Christensen talked about this in his book, The Innovator's Dilemma. And he talked about Honda entering into the motorcycle business in North America, which was dominated by Harley Davidson, big, loud, powerful motorcycles. And the Honda motorcycles, because of the culture and everything, is a very different kind of motorcycle, and they just couldn't compete. Americans wanted to buy big, powerful, loud, gas-guzzling motorcycles. And so they had set up a dealership out here in California, and these two Japanese men who were trying to sell the motorcycles were not having a lot of luck. So during the weekends, to kind of blow off some of their stress and steam, they would take the bikes, their motorcycles, out into the mountains and ride them in the dirt. And it was just the way that they were riding the motorcycles. And then what happened was people would see them, they would see this, and then they'd get excited about riding the motorcycles like off the road, dirt biking, because they were smaller, more manageable, and it created a whole different kind of customer. So nobody knew that they wanted this until they showed them that there was a different kind of recreational rider that wasn't interested in these loud bikes. They could not compete and beat Harley, so they found a whole different market. And time again, what you see is companies that are disruptive. It's the company that is disruptive. It's not necessarily the brand. They have an idea. They create a new customer. And then people associate those feelings and then say now, oh, I love that brand after the fact. You can see this with Amazon. You can see this with Netflix. Some of you are old enough remember this, that we used to go to a store, a brick and mortar store, unaware of what titles were available. We would browse through aisles and aisles of videos, and then later on DVDs and then Blu-rays or whatever, to find something and then pay some amount of money, and then we would be charged a late penalty. Well, those are all kinds of problems and all kinds of frustrations. Reed Hastings, I believe, who's the founder of Netflix, just said, you know what? We'll just send it to you. Keep it for as long as you want. In fact, their business model works better if you keep the disc longer, right? And so what happens is people's behaviors start to change. We get used to this idea that, you know what, if we put a few of the movies we want in our queue, we'll get a new one when we send the old one in. It just works like that. And then Netflix becomes a beloved brand, and then they pivot again, and they start to get into original content development, and now they're one of the most powerful companies in Hollywood. They had the vision to see something yet that wasn't articulated to them, and that's how you create a disruptive brand.
Wow. And who's that? Someone shared me that Blockbuster actually get a chance. They could acquire Netflix, but they made fun of Netflix at one point. Did you hear that story?
I didn't, but I would not be shocked because this happens all the time. Yahoo search.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes,
you went quiet, so.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. Can you guys hear me?
I could.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine.
We can hear you. All right. So Chris, what are some of the visual trends in 2021 or we're ending 2021? What are some of the future visual trends for us to look for 2022?
I don't spend a lot of time looking at design trends because if it's a trend and somebody's written about it, then it's already too late. I think what you need to do is look inward to see what it is that you like and speak your truth. And then if you do it enough and in your tribe and your community is strong enough, people say, oh, you've started a trend. And that to me doesn't really matter so much, because you can spend all of your life chasing trends, and I'm horrible at predicting what people want or like. And people make the craziest associations. Like, I remember somebody saying to me, oh, Helvetica is so trendy. I'm like, are you kidding me? How is Helvetica trendy? It's the most ubiquitous generic typeface, and it's been around for decades. What are you talking about? And what they're really reacting to is it's become something that's popped on their radar. It's come to their attention when they recognize the typeface. Just like how when you're looking for a red car, all you see are red cars. No, it's not a trend. Good design is not a trend. Using squares is not a trend, or circles, or whatever else people want to predict. So I think good design should stand the test of time, and that it should not be something that you have to chase every year or two to kind of change and update. Of course, brands update their logos and their color palettes ever so slightly, and they're making constant refinement. Like the good example would be Coca-Cola. That script that we all know is so ubiquitous as part of Coca-Cola, the stripe. They update that ever so slightly all the time, and only in comparison next to each other can you actually see it evolving. But I wouldn't worry so much about that. Plus, I'm terrible at predicting the future.
Your company name is the future, right? Without the E.
That's right. How ironic, right?
There you go. Now, Chris, can someone build a personal brand in 24 hours or less? Is that possible?
It is totally possible, because everyone already has a personal brand. They really do. And why can I say that? Is because a brand is your impression, your interpretation, your gut feeling about a person, a product, or a service. And it'd be hard to exist in this world without someone having an impression of who you are. The question is, every person you come in contact with, depending on who you are in your relationship with them, they can have a totally different impression. What do I mean by that? Okay, I'm almost 50 years old. My mom thinks of me as differently. Like, she thinks of me as her little boy. And my dad probably thinks of me one way. My younger brother thinks of me a certain way. My older, everybody has a slightly different impression. And so the way that a brand goes is, if enough people share a similar gut feeling or impression about you, then you have a brand. And so we all have brands. It just depends. The bigger question is, how many of us are intentionally shaping and cognizant or conscientious of the impression that we're making on people? This is the really important part. Our friend Christine Lucer, who teaches classes on branding at the Minerva School, she said that what we're doing is we're managing impressions. So it's called impression management. And that might sound like a fancy word for some people, but if you think about it, when you show up for a job interview, you're going to try to look your best. You're going to make sure that your face is put together, that you got a nice outfit on, and you're sharp and presentable, and you've got really good posture, and you're going to present a resume or CV to them. And you're trying to put this really good foot forward that I'm a professional person, I show up to do work, and you can count on me, I'm reliable. You can get back in the car after the interview and be a complete mess, but that's what impression management is. Now, if that impression that you're trying to create isn't true to who you are, it's going to take a lot of mental and physical effort for you to maintain that. And I bring that up because a lot of people have personal brands that are completely artificial. Everything is retouched, everything is staged and curated and edited to a point in which a whole nother person exists. The real you, which is the private you, and the public you. And this is why a lot of times people won't jump on a live call, or when you bump them in on the street, they're totally different. They're rude when they're nice online, or they're the opposite. They're really sweet in real life, and they come across as super aggressive online. What we want to do is we want to close that gap that exists between our public self. Sometimes people refer to this as the shadow self, as in the Jungian description, and the public self. So our private and our public selves, we want to close that gap. For me, it's just too much energy, to be honest, to try to be two different people. And sometimes when you pretend to be two different people, you forget one is the real you. And so what I try to do is encourage people, if you're trying to build a personal brand, look into your story, look at what you're good at, also look at the things that you're not good at, and just embrace all of it and slowly let people into who you are. Let them discover you. And in that way, not only will you be happy, but you're going to develop fans that are there for you the way that you are. Otherwise, you're just faking it.
Wow. Well, I can talk to you forever, but I don't want to be selfish. Dan, let's do Q&A. Dan?
All right, all right. So we're going to jump to Q&A here. Before we get to Q&A, I have a quick question for you, Chris. I noticed a lot of people, I know branding it's a lot, right? I was looking at your website, and there's so many different components and things that you teach. So it's a lot. However, though, just one example, and I'm curious as to why people get it wrong, and maybe there's a better way they can do it. I know a few people that have written books, and some of them have the worst looking book covers that I'm almost shocked that they even launched this book. I'm just using this as one example. It could be a website, it could be, certain things. And I just think in my mind, I wonder if and they didn't even come up with it. Somebody else did, so they signed off on it. Why is it that some people get it right and a lot of people just get it wrong? And is there somebody else they should be putting in front of? Maybe a branding expert versus a non-branding expert? But I don't know if this question is coming across. I just feel like I'm just curious as to why are people getting it wrong and what can they do?
That's a great question, Dan. Well, so here's the thing, is beauty is subjective. And the other thing I'm going to say, and this is not going to be a shocker to everyone, people just have really bad taste. And I'm not saying that in a judging way. I'm trying to say that objectively, like that is just bad taste, because not all of us we're not raised in like well-to-do families where people took us all over the world and educated us on photography, fashion, and architecture. We all didn't study art history the way we should have in high school, if that was even an option. And so that's the problem. And too, famous celebrities, they're horrible at dressing themselves, and that's why they have stylists. They look stylish, they live a fancy lifestyle, they're rich and famous, but they can't dress themselves, and that's why when you leave them alone for a little bit, they're usually making the 10 worst dressed celebrities list. And so I think authors are no different than any other human, and they create a book, and they're like, I don't know what's good, I don't know what's bad, I know how to write. And so they pick someone based on their same taste level to make the work. So they're in alignment, right? Because if they had good taste, they would have hired someone who with better taste and say, you know what? I trust you. You go do your thing. I don't know who it is to blame, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who you blame. The person who signs the check is going to have to take the responsibility for this. It's also why really trashy movies are made, because people just don't know what's good or bad. Like you watch one of those large, big budget pictures, then you sit there and think, who are the executives who still have a job who signed off on this script, this cast, this director, this treatment, this editing, and now $180-200 million have been spent on trash. But it happens all the time. Okay, I'm going to make some enemies today. All you have to do is go down the strip in Las Vegas and see examples of really bad taste. You see fake columns of marble. You see all kinds of gaudy architecture, replicas. But I guess at some point in time, people thought that was really cool. So for me, I don't think so.
Love that. Thank you. I appreciate that, Chris. It's something I've been thinking about for a while. So thank you for that. And all right. So if you would like to ask a question, I have a couple of people that have sent me a message in the back chat. Also, I know some people were flashing here. So I know Eric was the first, then Dr. Nashatir, then Mark, and we can go from there. We're opening up to Q&A. So people that don't know, this is Chris Do, the one and only Chris Do. You can check out his website, The Futur, without the E, no ego, TheFutur.com, The Futur with no E.com. Check him out. Social media is incredible as well. Love the Instagram. Tons of information. So let's go Eric, Dr. Nashatir, then Mark, and we can go from there.
And I just wanted to let you guys know that we are live as well. So Daniel will rephrase the question because we have a lot of audience loving and they want this recording because they want to hear from him. Dan, take it away.
Yes. So Eric, over to you, and then I will rephrase it.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. Kate, great to be here. Chris, so wonderful to be up here with you. And I've got a question, and it's a big question. If you were to build a brand right now, how would you do it? What would you focus on? What are your top 3 things that would drive you to build this brand?
All right, so everyone listening, top 3 things. I mean, this is incredible. That's a great question, Eric. Top 3 things to building a brand right now.
Wonderful. As I can see, we're not only recording on Clubhouse, but we're also live streaming. And so this is going to be a little complicated because I would like to ask Eric more questions, but since I don't want this to go through this crazy loop, I'm going to just assume we're having a dialogue about this. Okay. The question I would ask Eric is, what do you want to build a brand for? I want to start there. What's your goal? Like, if you could have your way in 5 years, if you are successful in building your brand, what have you accomplished? I want to know what the motivation is. Like, why do this? Why do you even need a brand? Then he would probably give me a bunch of answers, and then I would be able to select advice based on his answers. Okay. And so since we're doing this, let me just try and pretend like he said something that okay, now I get it, right? So I'll just say something. What I would say right now is, in order to build a brand, you need to know who it is that you serve. You got to figure out who your customers are. And I like to look for people that are on the fringes, on the edges of mainstream of, I guess there's something like the innovators, the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, and then the laggards. I actually like to look at the innovators and the early adopters, or even the laggards, because they're either looking for something new or they're so late to the party and you could still serve them. So you're looking for a customer who has an unmet need, who has probably yet to articulate it to everyone. And I would just study them and figure out what it is. And there's a simple exercise that you can do. It goes in 3 parts: a task, a gap, and then an opportunity. And so going back to Dr. Clayton Christensen, all you have to do is look for a job to help people accomplish. And if you can do that, and you could figure that out, you're going to create a very innovative company. So if you study one type of customer and you look at what they're doing on a daily basis, so from the morning to the night, you're going to pick apart gaps. And they're just simple things. Like, for example, if someone is so busy, they don't have proper time or time to prepare a proper lunch and they're just eating junk, well, that's a job they're trying to do, is eat healthy. But the gap is the lack of time, low interest in cooking, etc., and they're on a budget. And so then what I would do is then look at the opportunity that presents to me as a company. And if it's something I'm very excited about, something I'm passionate about, something I have experience or knowledge in, I might start to try to develop a line of foods that are pre-packaged, pre-washed, and everything's ready to go. All you have to do is assemble, and the minimum amount of cooking. I can create a company around that, and I can think of a name that speaks to the positive attributes of that company. And that's how I would start my company and then my brand. And if you're in a space that you already have a company and you're already servicing a particular customer type and you're doing really well, but you need help in spreading your services and sharing that across different platforms, you're entering into the marketing space. This is where I would dive deep into content marketing. I would try to educate my customer base, get people excited about the creative things that you can do, how much your life and health will improve, and just fun ways, and just educate people, because I think an educated audience is one that's primed to purchase more. And you can deliver value to people without spamming them or paying for a lot of advertising. And so if you can do that, and that's what we do, that's our business model. We teach people, we give freely. Most of the things that we produce, 99% of the things we produce are totally free, no strings attached, no email secret unlock code. And that's the relationship we build with our community. And the most amazing thing happens when you do that. When you show up for people, they show up for you. And Seth Godin writes about this in his book, This is Marketing. He says, marketing is the generous act of helping people get what they want. It's helping people to get what they want. So we figured out that there's a huge community of creative people who have questions about business, about branding, about marketing, about entrepreneurship, about pricing. So we try to help them and we give that to them. And what they do in return is they show up. They show up to rooms like this. They'll attend talks that I used to give in person. They'll attend virtual talks. They'll buy your courses. They'll drive across town to meet you. They'll buy your book. And we have people who buy books for their friends because they're such big supporters of what it is that we do. And that's how we build a brand. In the 21st century, Marty Neumeier writes about this. It's brand-to-brand combat. Instead of hand-to-hand, it's brand-to-brand combat. And the brand with the strongest tribe wins. And I have to say this, I say this with great pride. Put your tribe against our tribe. I'm pretty confident our tribe is going to be stronger than yours because we show up every single day to try to help them. So those are some of the tips. Let me quickly recap. One is figure out who you're serving and solve one of their pain points. The bigger the pain point, the more valuable you're going to be. Once you figure that out, get into content marketing and try to help people. If you help people, if you give them in the generous spirit without any expectations, you're going to build a really strong relationship because the third point is the brand with the strongest tribe will win.
Incredible. Thank you. What a great question. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. Thank you, Chris. That was, I mean, I hope everybody wrote that down. I love that about the tribe. So it was Dr. Nashatir, then I apologize. It actually was Frederick here. I missed him, then Mark. So Dr. Nashatir, Frederick, then Mark. Go ahead, Dr. Nashatir, and I'll rephrase your question for everybody watching on video.
Thank you. Good morning from Norway, Chris. Good to see you. I've joined a few of your rooms and I do love some of the content you share, particularly on the psychology behind this, which obviously speaks to my interest. So a question to you, a slightly different angle. How would you describe the personal brand you have today compared to how you started out? How has that changed? And how intentional is your brand now, or has it just been part of your organic growth as it's changed over time, if that makes sense? I'm done speaking.
Turns out I don't actually need to tell because people can hear the question. So you are good. No rephrasing needed.
Wonderful. That means I can actually have a real conversation with people. This is awesome. Okay. Hi, Dr. Nashatir. Good to see you again. Okay. Really great question about the evolution of a personal brand. I think as a human being, I evolve, so my brand evolves with me. I think it's that alignment that we're talking about. Something that people don't know about me. I was 42 years old when I made my first YouTube video. So I'm way past the prime demographic of people who create YouTube videos. So I'm a late bloomer. But that doesn't mean I don't have a personal brand. It doesn't mean that question of when a tree falls in the forest and no one's there doesn't make a sound. Of course it makes a sound. And you are creating impressions with people all the time. And because your audience is small, where it's in small communities or groups, it doesn't mean that you don't have a brand. Yes, you do, with the 5 or 6 or 12 or 200 people that you know in your life. And so I was teaching, I guess, how old was I? Probably around 27 or 28. 5 years after I graduated college, I started to teach. And I did have a reputation already because I'm a very serious person when it comes to work. I'm a really straight shooter, so I'm very direct. And sometimes that can come across as being rude or curt or something like that. And people do interpret that. But I always feel that I have an obligation to the people who show up to my classroom when they ask me a question, for me to give them my best every single day and to show up as who I am. And I think sometimes in very polite culture where we coddle people a little bit too much, the message is completely lost in all the flowery language and the roundabout way of speaking. And so I would do my best to be super professional, never make it personal, and I wasn't going to attack anybody. I was just going to say, here's what I think is working. Here's what I don't think is working. Here's what I think you can do to fix it. And we have a lot of fun. It is intense. And so people do sit at attention in my class. And some people are turned off by that. And some people just love it. And I continue to do this for years before I actually make a video on YouTube. And when I first made the YouTube video, I was not that person that was in class. I was trying to be someone on YouTube because I was afraid. What was I afraid of? I was afraid that once you record and broadcast a message, you can't put it back in the bottle, as they say. It lives forever. Once it's been published on the internet, it lives forever. There's really no way to take something down because someone has a copy of it. There's a mirrored version of it somewhere, and someone can grab it and then reshare it. And so I was very nervous about damaging a professional reputation, about alienating clients, about sharing things that I'm not supposed to be sharing because it is the truth, but people don't like to hear that. And so I was very reluctant and reserved in the early days of creating content. And you can see it on my face. You can see in the language that I chose. You can see it in how carefully I was phrasing things as if I'm being interviewed or I'm under suspicion for a crime or something. I'm just so careful with my words. I gotta tell you, that's no fun. So over the course of the next couple of years, I start to let out more of myself. And I start to become that same person that I am in my private life when I'm teaching and when I'm around friends. And the funniest thing happened. People would comment on YouTube and say, Chris, you've really changed. Oh my God, who's this person who's speaking his mind, who's laughing, who's joking, who's fanning out over a guest or whatever it is that you're doing? And I would write back to them, I'm not changing. I'm just showing you more of who I really am. And the more you do it, the more you put yourself out there, the more you become less afraid, the bolder you become, and you start to lean into that. And that's really who I am. So have I evolved? Yes, and evolved meaning I'm more like my true self, comfortable in front of strangers. And that's a battle I've had to overcome for a lot of my life because I'm a really shy person. Now, in terms of your other question, in terms of who or what is my personal brand, this is the beautiful part. Martin Neumeyer says a brand isn't what you say it is, it's what they say it is. It's a person's gut feeling about you. And so I have the best two-word brand because people tell me it all the time. So you can say that you're a kind person, that you're a generous person, but if nobody thinks that, all they do is roll their eyes, right? So I started using these two-word brand combinations where you pick two words that are almost like an oxymoron. They're juxtaposed in meaning, but the combination of the two makes something really good. As a student of branding and marketing and advertising, if you remember when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, he started talking about his insanely great products. Insanely great. So insane and great are two words that don't belong together. Insane is the negative word, great is a positive word. So if he said we're a super great company, that everybody would yawn. He was like, we're insanely vicious. Well, they're doubling up in their meaning. But the juxtaposition of insanely great said something. They're insanely obsessed about the detail, that no detail is too small for them to work on, which then creates this great user customer experience, and it's magical. And so my two-word brand is loud introvert. And I say that because people keep asking, there's no way you can be an introvert. You're on the stage, you're speaking in front of hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. How could this be? And I have to explain the story. So I think right now, for me, loud introvert describes me really well. But then when you have a good strong base and strong fan base and your tribe is really strong, they start suggesting names too. So someone says, you're a charming razor blade. And I told that to my wife. She laughed. She goes, your fans really know you. A charming razor blade or disciplined fire. I don't know what that means, but I like that too. Or they'll say you're the business Buddha. So you can see when you find two words and they're juxtaposed together that you can uniquely claim that is you, I think you find your two-word brand. And I hope that answers your question.
That was incredible, Chris. Wow, thank you so much for sharing and for being so open in your journey. Love the advice on the juxtaposition of those two names. It's got my brain whirring. Thank you. I'm done speaking.
That was incredible. I think we all need to figure out what our two words are. So love that. Just in case people don't know, we're talking to Chris Do. Check him out, The Futur, thefuturwithnoe.com. Future.com. You can also follow social media. You can tap on him, check out his IG. He's got 600 something thousand on there now. YouTube, almost close to 2 million. He's teaching 1 billion people. 1 billion people. I see you're at almost 27,000 that have already signed up, and I don't know if that number has changed on your website, but 1 billion people, big, hairy, audacious goal. So I know Frederick here, who's also on the StreamYard, he wanted to ask some questions, and then we can go from there. Frederick, I'm going to hand it to you.
First of all, Chris, I just want to say that I am a tremendous fan. I watch the shorts on YouTube all the time. I just have those running on repeat, and then I've watched so many videos. And so one of the things
we
that
can't hear Frederick.
oh, you can't hear me?
We can't hear Frederick.
Oh, let me make sure my mic is working.
Oh, Frederick, are you in the room?
Yeah, I'm
He's not in
here.
the room. He's just having.
Or are you only StreamYard?
I'm only in StreamYard.
Oh, he's only StreamYard. All right, we'll have to go the other way.
I can tap into the room if you want.
Yeah, we might have. We can't hear you at all,
Frederick. So we'll just.
there
you go. Why don't we just go to the next one? There you go. He's here.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll use Clubhouse anyway. Good stuff. So I am a huge fan, Chris. Just wanted you to know that. I watch the YouTube shorts all the time, consumed hours and hours of the video. I fan out over the branding. And I'm not a branding, I'm not a designer, graphic designer, but I love design as a creative. My background is in music, but my career kind of evolved because when you're working independent, you have to marry all elements, the visual with the audio, building an audience and things like that. And I think that really formed the basis for my career in entrepreneurship overall. So one of the things that I love about you is how deeply you think about branding, design, creativity, and entrepreneurship all rolled into one. My question for you would be, how do you think, or how did you evolve to think as an innovator and to think about the process of design and creativity? I think of you obviously as one of the thought leaders in the space and probably across all entrepreneurship. How does one as an entrepreneur start to think like a great designer, creator, innovator?
Frederick, very nice to meet you. Good to see you, and thank you very much for being a fan of the channel. I see you in your big red chair with the beautiful purple and blue light behind you. I love the symmetry. I think you are a designer, maybe not in traditional sense, but I can see that everything is laid out and everything has a purpose and a place in the video that I can see with you. I think your question has so many different components for me to unpack, and I don't want to turn it into an hour-long answer. So I'll pick the part that I think is most interesting to me. And if you're not satisfied with the answer, please just ask again, and I'll do better the second time. I think the key word I want to focus in on is innovation. How do you create this mindset of innovation? And it's a battle between a couple of different conflicting ideas. Now, most of us go into a mindset of trying to be efficient. We try to optimize our process, and we can see this all the time. People are trying to automate their business. They're trying to recognize patterns really quickly and to squeeze out. So they want to be able to do more work in less time and make more money. And it's pretty human to do that. It's pretty natural. And then you become a company that's making small refinements, and you're being very iterative in your approach. And that is not going to lead you to creating your moonshot idea. To be innovative, you have to try to do really crazy things that everyone says is not possible to do, or that's so dumb, that's so stupid. And when enough people start saying things like that, you know, at least you have an idea. It may not work out as a business, but it's going to challenge what people think is an acceptable idea. And if too many people say it's a good idea, it's probably an idea that's already old, because new ideas challenge people. It scares people, and it should scare you a little bit too. So innovation is inherently messy and wasteful and completely inefficient. And now, I'm not telling you to be reckless around your business and try crazy ideas and bet the farm, mortgage the house, and be on the streets and be bankrupt. There is an idea that you can borrow from some of the most innovative thinkers, which is to take one big gamble and chop it up into many small bets. So Jason Fried and David Hansen Heinmeier, the founders of Basecamp, the company 37 Signals, and they talk about this. They say instead of doing one 10-week project, they say do 10 one-week project. And you learn so much by doing. You learn and understand by doing. So rather than plan for 7 weeks and then build and then find out it doesn't work after exhausting all of your resources, where the outcome is either you fail or you win. And if you fail, it's disaster. And if you win, everybody's calling you a genius. Do these little 1-week sprints. Try to build the minimum viable product and a minimum viable idea, whatever it is, and then you learn, and then you ask yourself a question like, what did we learn from this? How can we improve upon this idea? Or do we need to start over? And that's how you start to develop this mindset of innovation. Now, it just so happens that I don't play well with others. I've never been really good at doing what I've been told to do. In fact, the best way to motivate me to do something is to tell me it cannot be done. Little short story here about the concept of the future as an education company. I tried to share this idea with bigger, successful organizations. I don't want to get into it, but I did approach the school where I was teaching at during a big staff meeting, like an all hands on deck kind of staff meeting. And after everybody talked about whatever the issues were of the day, I raised my hand to my peers, to my former professors, and I asked them this question. I said, are we not concerned that the cost of tuition has risen so much that it's untenable, it's unconscionable, and we're not doing anything about this? Are we also realizing that most of us could not put ourselves through school if we didn't have parents to support us based on the kind of money we're talking about right now? So how do we do this? How do we continue to teach at a school where by virtue of the cost of tuition, we're saying only a very small select group of people who are so well off that their parents have no problem footing a $200,000 bill? How is that possible? In the meanwhile, we have the proliferation of open, free platforms where we can teach and preserve the knowledge of incredible design masters. Why are we not leveraging that? And why are we double downing on this brick and mortar system? As it turns out, the idea was, I know this sounds crazy to all of you, it was too radical for them. And so I literally had meeting after meeting until finally the people with the power to make a decision literally laughed at me and said, you know what? This is a dumb idea. You're being an alarmist. Everybody will want this thing. Everybody will want to be around each other in school in close proximity. You see what's happened here, right? And so I was frustrated. And after making 2 failed attempts with 2 different institutions, I decided to do something about it. So when people tell me they can't do it, it's a dumb idea, it's the best way to motivate someone like me. I'm hardwired to go against that. Please tell me I can't do it, because that's all the fire I need. And I'm super motivated to prove them wrong. In my mind, I know this is childish. I say to myself, oh yeah? Watch. And so we disappear. We do the hard work. We make a lot of mistakes. And we fail in relative anonymity. And we keep trying new ideas. And that's the thing about my spirit or my nature, is just because everyone is doing it one way, I don't believe that that's the way. I want to challenge those assumptions. And there's a lot of different systems and frameworks that you can borrow and you can use. One of which I'm going to highly recommend is if you're into reading books, there's a book called Think Wrong. Think Wrong, like it's a perfect title. It's a book written by John Bielenberg and a few other people. And he has frameworks and exercises that you can do to break your patterns of behavior. So these kind of synaptic patterns that we develop become stronger the more we do something. And if you're a fully realized adult, you have built within you a preconditioned way of thinking about the world. You fall into patterns really quickly. And for the most part, this is an advantage, except for when it comes to coming with new ideas. So we have to scramble our thinking process in order for us to think new ideas. And he has some really helpful exercises to do that in the book. He also has a game that you can play with cards called Think NATO, like a tornado, but thinking. So Think NATO, like Sharknado. And it is using some kind of random word pairings to help you break out of the patterns. So if you like to play a game, you can buy the deck, or if you like to read the book, or you can buy both. I highly recommend it for anybody. He's been running design thinking workshops for over 10 years, helping out some of the biggest companies in the world. And he shares a story in the book, and I want to share it with you because it's such a powerful story, that he was meeting up with some creative people, and they were talking about big ideas, and they're at a bar, and they're talking, and one of the women, based on one of the prompts is, what's the secret hidden power that you have? And she had said, I don't know if it's a power, but I really like pies. And I don't just like them, I'm obsessed about pies. And he's like, okay. And so a whole conversation, and she proved it by ordering a pie at the bar and eating a pie in front of everybody. And they were talking about why she loves pies so much. Pies and coffee make people happy. And when people are happy, sitting together, conversation happens. And in the conversation is where people get to know each other and barriers come down. And John was thinking, is this a company? Is this an idea even? And he admits he thought it was stupid. But the thing that he did was he just kept quiet because he doesn't want to kill ideas. And so an opportunity happened that they're thinking about this idea. It just so happened that March 14th was coming around, 3/14, which is Pi, National Pi Day. So they're going to try to do some marketing around this. So this is a great way that you can tap into a trend. Brands that are powerful tap into trends. They notice culture moving in a specific direction. And unlike design trends, I love cultural trends. I like to see where society is moving and behavior is changing, because you can actually ride that, and it's powerful. Brands that are propelled by movements and trends can be very powerful. So they tap into this, and then later on, they do a pop-up shop in a very rural community that's super poor, and they have pie, and they design things to be very different. They have a couple of rules. First, you must eat the pie. There's no to-go orders, no takeout, because the whole point was to have conversation. And they set up one giant long table. There's only one table in this pop-up store. So everybody has to sit together. And people from all different walks of life, different shapes, sizes, colors, persuasions, they sit and have pie, and everybody's in a really good mood. And what happens is quite incredible. This once broken down community is revitalized, and they're nominated for a James Beard Award for their pies. Press is written about them, and people make the pilgrimage to have pie at this place. So a really dumb idea, pie, can actually have great impact. And just leaving space to try something new, something different, something stupid, you can actually create meaningful impact within your community, and you can actually create an innovative company that way. So the book is called Think Wrong, written by John Bielenberg, and the card game is called Think NATO. And if you just look up Think Wrong or Think NATO, you can probably find the resources. I'm not paid to say any of this, by the way.
Chris, you answered about 4 other questions that I wanted to answer. So that was incredibly powerful. I'm curious, how much do you read?
I don't read as much as I'd like to. I try to read a book a week, and I have to say that I have not been always an avid book reader. I like to think of myself as above average intelligence, and a good observer of people. But I would say that in the last 3 or 4 years, I've read more books than I have in my entire lifetime put together. And I've given myself permission to take days off of work just to read. So it's built into my calendar. So for me, Tuesdays are for reading, and it's blocked out already. So very rarely I'm going to do something on Tuesday, because that's what I'm supposed to be reading. And initially, when I started to adopt this habit, I felt very guilty. I thought I should be on the machine, answering calls and sending in whatever materials that people need from me, reviewing projects. But I just told everybody I'm not going to do that. And it took me a little while to not feel guilty. As a self-professed workaholic, it is very hard to take time away and do things like that. So I dedicate Monday for writing and Tuesday for reading. Sometimes I read on 2 days. Sometimes I write for 2 days, or sometimes I don't read or write, and that's totally okay too. Having a schedule doesn't mean you become a slave to your own schedule. It just means that you put yourself as a priority. And that's really important. Put yourself as a priority. Otherwise, every other priority will supersede your own. And by doing so, I've also developed different reading habits where I can read a book. When I say read a book, I don't mean just speed read from cover to cover. I mean read and squeeze out every piece of information from a book in about a day. So given an 8-hour day, I can read the book from cover to cover, take notes, highlight words, write ideas down. And I have a very specific system about how I read, because I think I'm reading not to read, I'm reading to teach. So every time I read a book, I want to be able to share those ideas with other people. And I used to go on stage and tell people I'm the bald Asian Robin Hood. I steal from the information rich, I give to the time poor. I steal from the information rich and I give to the time poor, because all of us do not have enough time to learn the things that we need to learn so that we can do the things that we need to do. So I will take that for you. And the thing that I tell myself, I bought this book. It's $30. But just watch me. I'm going to turn this $30 book into a $30,000 course, because I'm going to combine it with different ideas. I'm going to be able to share. I'm going to be invited to speak on stage and do different workshops, and different sponsors are going to pay me to talk about something, host a room, because I'm richer for the knowledge from the book that I've read. Thanks for asking that question, Frederick.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that answer. I just have, well, I have more questions, but I want to ask you this, because I know that as creatives, we admire the creativity around us that inspires us. So I want to ask you, what other designs, or it could be the object, it could be a building, whatever. But what are the things, or maybe pick the top 3 or things that you've seen recently that really inspire you in a way that makes you wish that you had designed it yourself?
Okay, that is a tough question. I think I'm in love with beautiful things, and beautiful things come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them are tangible, some of them are intangible. And this will probably give you insight into the person that I am and my personal preferences. There's a clothing brand that I love. It's called G-Star, and my closet is filled edge to edge with G-Star, and I'll tell you why. Okay, growing up as a refugee coming to America, I had some fascination with the special forces, the military, and I just love everything about it. I love the design of the uniforms, the patches and the badges. I love everything about it. I even like the design of guns. I don't own a gun. I've never fired a gun, but I just love all of that. And G-Star, to me, combines utilitarian clothing with military details. I just love that. And so that's one thing I wish I designed. 2, I love movies. I love media. I love storytelling. And I love every part of that. So when I'm not, quote unquote, working, I'm probably on the box watching some series, and I'm studying the writing, the acting, the dialogue, how they create tension, how they release tension. And I recently watched a series called Caliphate, and it was a wonderful series on Netflix. Very powerful, very sad, very tragic story. But I was telling my wife, see, if people just did the logical thing in all of these scenes, there would be no more story. The story would have ended in episode 3, but they have to invent a device where if we suspend disbelief, it compels the story to move forward. You know, and the classic trope, and you'll recognize this every single time, because I do like to study film and cinema, is when a friend calls someone to tell them something that they need to tell them, but for whatever reason, they can't finish that call. That's when you, as an audience especially, you're probably screaming at the TV screen, just tell her you love her. Just tell him you forgive him. Just tell him the key is under the rug and everything will be fine. But if they say that piece of information, the character becomes too smart and they do what they need to do, and the resolution to the story is now complete. Like the tension is gone. So what they do is, it's like, there's something I have to tell you, Mary. It's something and then there's a bomb and explodes. And the other person's like, Jennifer? And you're sitting there, good, I can't believe it. And so screenwriters, who are able to write and create natural tension builders that don't insult my intelligence, I sit up and I recognize that. I don't literally do this, but I salute them in my mind, at least, because my wife is probably going to slap me in the head and say, what the hell are you doing right now? There's nobody there. Nobody can see you. So I admire really sharp writing. And so I love watching cinema. I love reading comic books. I love being in beautiful spaces when the retail experience is designed to the T. Every little part and piece, from the way it's displayed to the tags to the window display, it draws you and it tells you a story. I can go on and on about that, but I'll stop there.
Oh, Dan, I have a question for Chris. Chris, are you involved in NFT at all, or any plan on doing NFT projects at all? Is that something that interests you? I'm curious.
I am curious about NFTs. I have no plans. It's a little bit of it's like a crazy lawless environment that I'm not sure I'm ready to put myself into it. And the stories that you read, people's wallets being stolen, scams, and just there's some shadiness going on there. And I just want to let the smoke and the dust clear before I get into that.
Thank you. Dan, back to you.
Okay, all right. So just want to make sure, Chris, how much more time do you have?
I think I could do 20 more minutes before I go.
Here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Frederick, for adding in there. We appreciate you. Always great seeing you here on the StreamYard. This is Christo, branding expert. I'm not sure what are the 2 words. I was trying to think of 2 words for you, Chris, but I couldn't think of 2 words. But thefuture.com, F-U-T-U-R, thefuture.com. Think of your 2 words before Chris is done today. Christo is who we are talking with today. We had Mark and then Justine were the next 2. Mark and then Justine. Go ahead. Take it away, Mark.
Hey, thanks, Daniel. And thanks, Chris, for your time. I know it's late here on the West Coast, pushing 10 o'clock. My wheels have been turning since we've been talking. I've been a sponge over here just taking it all in. I'm a United States Marine Corps vet, so you kind of triggered that too a minute ago. And I had a good question. And when you mentioned that story, it all changed. But I have been podcasting for a year, and I'm a natural introvert myself. And the minute I got on YouTube and started recording and went live, it freaked me out, as you can imagine. And I think I broke that probably my 11th or 12th episode. And the rest is history. I'm still a work in progress. I'm going to change my question because I was going to ask you about branding for vets, but I'm more curious about your culture shock, being a refugee, leaving your home country to come to the United States. What was that like? And the exposure you had to the military that created such curiosity from you. And this is Mark in the Black. I'm complete.
Thank you very much, Mark. I came to the United States in 1975. I was 3 years old. April 30th, my family fled during the collapse of Saigon. My dad was in the military, so he has a relationship with the Army. My mom worked as a secretary for the embassy, and promises were made about evacuation. And of course, if you studied that, it all falls apart. And so my parents' escape from Vietnam is a harrowing tale. And it's the ingenuity and the perseverance of my dad and my mom thinking quick on their feet that we're still a family today. Now, I don't have any memory of this at all. And when I talk to my family therapist about this, and she's like, you don't have language, but you feel it. And you need to start to understand what those feelings are. So sometimes if you're feeling scared, if you're feeling like you're holding on to things, you just remember your parents felt it, and then you feel their feelings as a child. You just don't have the language to describe it. So we landed in Kansas City, Missouri. That's where our sponsors were, and grew up relatively poor. Government assistance and just finding out about this place called America. I love to share this story. I wish I knew all the stories my uncles would share, but it just shows you the mindset and how different America was than where they came from. My uncle, my dad's younger brother, was driving around with his wife, not then wife, they're still together. They're driving around and they see this sign on the lawn and it says garage sale. And he turns to his wife and he says, America's such a great place. Like you can't afford everything, but they can even sell you the garage. So I promise you one day when I make enough money, I will buy you the garage, not realizing it's just selling the contents. And they have so many of these stories that I'm laughing my head off, just trying to understand what it was like for them, like sitting down at McDonald's waiting to be served and just wondering why they won't be served. It's stuff like that. So definitely culture shock. And what it meant to me as a person growing up in America was seeing how both my mom and dad worked really, really hard. My dad, for most of my life, up until as long as I lived with my dad, he would disappear in the morning, get up before I got up, before I went to school, and he would come home when it was dark outside. What I didn't know about my dad was he doesn't have a college education, but he started out his life in America bussing tables, and by the time he retired as a chief engineer at Applied Materials, which is a semiconductor company in Silicon Valley. I never knew what my dad did, but what he did was he'd go to a job and then he would go to night school and get training. And back then, when we were in America, you could be a hardworking, honest person, and the company would train you. They invested in you. And so I would see these binders in my dad's truck. He drove a beat up secondhand truck, and I would just see binders and binders of stuff. I flipped through them like, what is all this stuff? And so that was my dad. He's a smart man. We call him Mr. Fix-It because there's nothing he can't fix, electronic or mechanical. He's no good with computers, but everything else he can fix. And so that's our story of like coming to America and growing up. But I also wanted to share a couple of things in that the reason why I'm maybe more shy than a normal introvert is because we moved a lot. I counted how many places we lived, and every 18 months we moved to a different home on average. So it was very disorienting for me as a child. I didn't build long-term relationships with the exception of one friend, because I always thought to myself, why get to know someone? Because you're going to move. You're not going to see them. And it happened a lot. And I just felt very isolated. I felt very alone. And my biggest fear whenever school started was, who am I going to eat lunch with today? And who is going to try to fight me today? And if you see me today, I'm 5'8". I'm not a big person. I'm about 140 pounds. And back then I was even smaller and skinnier. And there's always some rat punk who wants to try to find an easy target. And I knew from my older brother, who always taught me, no matter what you think the odds are, if you don't stand up to people, if you don't stand up for yourself, you're going to be a victim for all of your life. So it meant that it's going to happen. It's inevitable. I'm going to get into a fight with somebody. And win or lose, I'm going to stand my ground. And so that's a very difficult thing for me growing up in America. Even in California, as progressive as we are, or we think we are, there's still some backwards people who just by looking at you will have all kinds of assumptions about who you are, and they'll use those opportunities to make themselves feel bigger. So getting things pulled away from you, being pushed, getting punched, all those things were part of my childhood experience. And it's one of the reasons why I think I'm as resilient and as rebellious as I am today. So maybe when those institutions are telling me, don't try to do this online education thing, it's silly, it reminds me of one of those boys, or many of those boys, who try to take advantage of me and push me around or steal something from me and say, I'm not going to stand up. I'm not going to stand for this. You and I were going to get into something no matter what happens. So there's a little bit of that fighter inside of me that says, no, you cannot deny me this. I'm willing to go down in a fight with you. So let's go. So that was my experience, Mark.
This is Mark again in the black. Do you think all that adversity made you such a fighter growing up? Because I know I went through that. We moved probably 20 times in the 80s when the jobs were hard to find. My dad moved us, I think, 25 times on the West Coast. And it mentally taught me how to be a fighter and overcome adversity. Is that kind of what you did for you as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think all those things shape, like all of our lives and our experiences shape who we are and how we feel. You and I could have gone into very different directions. We could have been victims. We could have just cowered and disappeared, and probably no one would know us today. we could have developed amazing social skills. So we learned that the skill to survive is to become really social and talk to people and build instant friendships, because that's how we're going to be protected. But you and I grew up differently. You know what? We go into those situations like, I don't have the social skills. I'm not going to disappear. So I'm just going to stand there at attention, at, holding a guard, probably fists clenched just in case something happens, because things do happen like that. And I do think adversity builds your resiliency. And I think those are important characteristics. Now, as a parent of two boys who are 17 and 15 years old, I worry a little bit in my mind that they've never been picked on. For the most part, they've lived in one home all their lives, gone to private school where everybody is in a very loving, homogenous culture. I wonder when they face adversity, when they're rejected, or when someone treats them in a way that they feel is unfair, are they going to be able to cope and process? And so I have developed little games that I play with my boys since they were young to try to help them to build up this kind of muscle, because I don't want it to be in the streets as when they first are exposed to it.
All right, awesome. I know we're running close to time here. So thank you, Mark. I know we had a few more people, so let's see how many people we can get in. I'm guessing we're coming down to the wire, but I know Justine had a question, Lindsay and Emily. So Justine, take it away. So if you could please make your question as short and succinct as you can, that would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dan and Kate, for this incredible space. And Chris, it's such an honor and a privilege. As always, I interviewed Chris on my podcast. It was fire, so go and check it out. You're just one of the most intelligent people in this field, and I'm a huge fan of yours. And Chris, I just wanted to know, in your opinion, what are the traits that the most valuable brands of the future will have? Thanks so much.
Hi, Justine. Good to hear your voice again. The most valuable traits. I'm going to have to ask for a lifeline. I need a few minutes to think about this. It's not a question I sit there and lay awake at night and think about, like, the most valuable traits. So let me think about that, and maybe we can take another question so I can give you an intelligent answer. You caught me off guard there.
I have one more. If you
Oh, you do?
mind,
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I do. So, in a digital world, where we're saturated with media, I think it's important to build a human connection with your customers. And I know you're a master of this. Do you have any tips for, any of us building a brand to actually do this, like build a human connection with our customers? Thanks, Chris.
Okay, I can answer that question. Okay, at the end of the day, the impression that you're building, the impression that you're trying to manage, has to live up to the experience that people actually have. And I think one of the best companies that does this is Zappos. They sell a commodity. They don't offer steep discounts, yet people love Zappos for a lot of the different things that they do. And they try to make customer service a big part of who they are, and that's how they're able to differentiate themselves. And if you're familiar with the Zappos experience, they do things like they upgrade your shipping, and they go above and beyond to try to keep you on the phone when you have a problem, and they'll do just about anything to help you resolve the problem, because they know that the people who buy a shoe, who have a positive experience, will become customers for life. I got to see Tony Hsieh speak live way before his days of partying and unfortunately his untimely demise. I got to see this man and his philosophy, and I was so connected with it. Over shoes, things that I don't even care that much about. So it shows you that even commodities, there's room for innovation. There is room for innovation in everything that we do. There's a book, The Truth About Customer Service or Service. And I love this book because it shares a story, and I'm going to throw this out there. Just hang in there with me if you heard me tell this story before, because it's so powerful. In the book, it says great customer service is about creating memories for people. So you're a memory designer. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to craft an experience so that people walk away feeling something about the experience they had. So if you love a certain brand of ice cream, chocolate, or if you like going to Disneyland, it's the memory that's forged in your mind that keeps you going back to get you an annual pass, that then when you're old enough, you bring your children to, and the tradition continues on, and you relive those memories through your children. And they share the story about how they go into a supermarket and they talk about the importance of customer service, and that every single person there can make a difference. You can have an impact. So there's the story of Johnny the bagger, and Johnny has Down syndrome, and he's saying, I want to help, but I'm just a bagger. I can't do anything. So he has a disability. And that night he goes home, he tells his dad about what he's heard. And so he has this idea. He has little phrases that he likes to say to like pick himself up and to also to spread some cheer and optimism. So he and his dad get on the computer, they typeset this thing, and they put all his little phrases onto a piece of paper, and they print it out and they cut it up into tiny little strips. Johnny's really happy. So he brings his back to work with him, and he puts it in a paper bag. So each customer that gets into the line, as they're checking out, he puts a little message in there for them from him. It will say something like, always look to the positive side, Johnny the bagger, or something like that. And then what happened was people would unpack their groceries at home and they would read the messages and they felt touched. They felt personally touched. Very simple idea, super inexpensive to do. And so one day, the grocery store manager is looking at what's happening in that the aisle in which Johnny was the bagger, the line was just like 7-8 people deep. So he gets over the PA system. He's like, you know what? We need more checkers up here. He would try to reroute people out of that line and move them to a different line. And they would refuse to move. They're like, no, we're in this line on purpose. And he's like, what is happening here? And so the whole moral of the story is that anybody and everybody here can do something no matter what position you are in. If you're in the lowest position, the highest position, or no position at all, to do something that creates a memory for someone else. And if you want to have an unbeatable competitive advantage, build the strongest possible relationship with your customers. This is a lesson I failed at personally. I ran my design company for 25 years, and I took it for granted that by doing good work, that was customer service. And I'm a little saddened because there have been some great, incredible customers who've been extremely loyal to us. And I was too shy. I was too weird. I was too awkward that I never went out to dinner with them. I never went out to lunch with them. I always sent my team. And it's something that if I could do over again, those are some of the things I would try to improve, which is to improve the customer service experience and to create a memory. And during lean times, when people can choose other people, they're going to remember that. And now I'll share 2 quick customer service stories with you about outstanding brands that I've personally had an experience with, and I'm not paid to say this at all. I bought an AV receiver, or a stereo receiver, and amp from Sony, and I used it for a couple of years, and then for some reason, the audio was cutting out. So I go on Sony's website, I try to figure out a return, and they're like, well, this is a pretty old model. Just send it in and we'll try to repair it. We'll let you know what it costs to fix it. They send me a note back. They said the model's too old. They cannot fix it. I'm like, oh, what a bummer. Okay, that's fine. They said, well, we're going to send you a different model. I'm like, okay. What's it going to cost me? They're like, nothing. And what they do is they send me not the model that I bought, but the flagship model of the current year. No questions asked. A brand new one, not a refurbished, repaired one, a brand new one. And that moment I said, Sony, you have a customer for life. And I have many stories about brands that say they're about customer service, about quality and all these kinds of things, and they fall apart. They do not live up to their promise. So the brand and the impression that you're creating is only as good as what is in reality happening in human-to-human relationships. So if you want to create an unbeatable brand, a brand of the future, focus on customer service.
Oh my God, that was like ridiculous. Masterclass. Thank you so much, Chris. And I loved what you said about being a memory designer. I think that is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. You are amazing and I appreciate you so much. Thanks, Chris. This is Justine.
Thank you so much, Justine.
Hey, Chris, can you get 2 more quick questions?
Yeah, sure, I could do it.
Okay, so just make sure the question is please short. Lindsay on the horse, welcome. And I'm going to hand it to you, then Emily after to close it out.
Hi, Chris. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Kate. Awesome room. I haven't been on in a while, but I love Chris, and Chris, I followed you for a while elsewhere. I just found your Instagram though, so amazing. Good to see you. I just had a question. I've never really heard you directly talk about this, so I was just curious if you had anything that you're doing in this space of like heuristic design or heuristic branding, and I just wondered what your thoughts were on that, and where your brain goes in that kind of realm.
Oh, that's a fancy question. Heuristic design. I think I know the meaning of the word. And so if I have to question the meaning of the word, it means I probably have not been thinking about it too much. Can you help me out? What does heuristic design mean?
Sure. So, I mean, it's really kind of based on like where people naturally go without really, a knowledge base. So it's more like triggering them. Specifically, it has a lot to do with like how we naturally just sort of appeal to things. Like for example, on your Instagram, you've got a lot of posts that some of them specifically are regarding shades. Like for example, our eyes naturally go to certain shades in a reference, right? But if you switch up those shades, you're going to cause the consumer to have a different trigger, right? We know that. Like maybe if it's darker, it's going to compel some sort of a feeling. But sometimes those heuristic feelings have to do with the past. They may not have to do with right now. They may have to do with something that we might have seen yesterday. They may be more attributional. So I guess I was just curious. I see you talking about things that are very heuristic driven, but I haven't seen you actually talk about heuristics in general. But I feel like it would be really cool to see your thoughts on this. So if you need more time or something you're going to look into and then come back another time, would be awesome. But you're doing it if you don't know. So very cool.
Well, thank you. I'm going
And that's
to.
part of heuristics, by the way, is just doing things because we do them, and then we kind of do them, and then everybody else does them. So monkey see, monkey do. It's interesting. So.
I see. I don't know enough to speak intelligently about this. So if you're picking up some vibes, I'm not going to even take any credit for it, any conscious effort. There's some things that I do. I just look. We're going to veer off into something totally different here, a different topic, but maybe someone listening will find this to be helpful. I find that when people send me Instagram content to look at, and I'm not encouraging anyone to do this because I will not review your content. I'm just talking about my friends, and I look at their content and I scratch my head and I say, well, why would you pick that typeface and that weight with those colors? Because every conscious decision you're making is making it harder for me to read. And when the whole point of it is to get me to read, because if I can't read your ideas, I don't know what it is you're thinking. If I don't know what it is you're thinking, I don't know what you're saying. And I don't know who you are. And so my general rule to every single person here is if you're going to write content, pick a typeface that's not too bold, that's not too thin, that's really easy to read, and typeset it in the minimalist kind of way. Don't get tricky unless you're a designer, because everything you do makes it harder for me to connect to the content. Now, then you would say, well, why don't we just pick black and white? You could do that, and that's fine. And I like black and white content. But black and white content is at the opposite ends of the value scale and is extremely contrasty, which is good for so many different things, except for when you look at a wall of posts and it's all black and white all over the place. It's almost too much contrast for me. And so in my last phase of exploring content, I try to pick two shades that are not going to tire you out, that's not going to be overly fatiguing. You can see this on some content on Instagram where, and I think it's more male dominated, but I have no real data to prove this. They pick some of the most shocking color combinations. It's like yelling at me the entire time. To me, to my very sensitive eyes, it's the equivalent of doing all caps, bold, italic with no letter spacing or leading. It's screaming at me the entire time. And I look at it and I have to just look away because it's so fatiguing. So if you're going to create content, whether it's on Instagram or anywhere else, you have to think, why am I creating this content? What is my intention? How do I want people to feel? What do I want them to see and experience and learn? And the first rule in writing content is make sure the content is legible. So you want contrast, but not so much contrast and not so many like vivid, shocking, saturated colors that it becomes really fatiguing to the person trying to read it. The other rule to creating content is to write in a way that's conversational. This is really important. And it sounds really simple. It sounds like, duh, don't even tell us this. It's obvious, dude. Just do this. When you're writing, read your content aloud. Just read it out loud. It will sound funny when you read it out loud because we're cooler in our heads than we are in real life. Read it out loud and see how it feels. And when you get hung up in reading the sentence is too long or it's using too big of a word, change it. Make it shorter. Don't try to impress people with your fancy vocabulary. Just make it easy for people to read and understand, because that's the whole point of communication. And so with that, I wrote on my notepad here, heuristic design. When I come across it again, I'm going to give it more thought. And hopefully the next time when I see you on your horse, Lindsay, literally riding in on a horse, we'll have an informed, intelligent conversation around this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. Back to you, Dan.
Thank you, Lindsay. Always great seeing you. All right, Emily, you are the last one because I know we're way past time. So thank you, Chris, though. Really appreciate you. Lindsay, Emily, you're going to close it out.
Wow, I feel so special. Chris, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. You're someone on Clubhouse that I do admire. And obviously, this is a big room. I think a lot of people have stuck around, which is amazing because I feel like it's rare these days on Clubhouse. So congrats on such a great room. I am just very curious in terms of how would you recommend, because we talked a bit about this when it came to like book covers, but how would you recommend or, support those who may not be super in the know about trends with graphic design or just in general, like really steering away from cliches when it comes to branding, especially in different business industries. And I guess like the other part of that question is like, what keeps you inspired to keep moving to like the edge of what's possible? And while it still looks like you stay pretty minimal. So I'm just really curious about, what inspires you and how would you, support other people listening in terms of guiding them away from certain cliches when it comes to branding?
Wonderful question, Emily. What a wonderful way to wrap up our conversation today. You asked me a question I have thought about and I can answer, so I appreciate that part. And we have not talked about it in some time, so I'm also grateful for that. There's something that happens, and it's how we connect to each other as human beings, that when you see something happening and there's a crowd that gathers, your curiosity is piqued, you walk over and you're like, what is that? And so a crowd attracts a crowd. So when you see a typeface that you haven't seen before used in a way that you hadn't considered, and you're like, that's really visually pleasant and aesthetically beautiful, and I like that. I wonder what colors, I wonder what they're doing here. And the way that we learn is we do it through emulation. So when I see a certain typeface, I see someone use it, and it's a fresh interpretation. I think, wow, that's really smart. Whoever designed this, they did a good job, and I like it. And so the tendency is to be pulled into like gravity, just pulling you in, and there's nothing you can do. It's okay to explore this. And every time that we're new in an industry, we try all kinds of crazy stuff because we think the best way for us to be creative is to use every design resource available to us. We use too many colors, too many textures, too many typefaces because we're like a kid in a candy store and we go nutso. And then there's that natural phase where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I've exhausted it and I'm wiped out. I'm going to start to pare things back. And you go through this natural arc and this curve. As you become more mature in your design taste and sensibility, you start to realize a little goes a long way. And then now you're not seeking to chase after what everyone else is chasing. You just go to the fundamentals, the foundations of really good design: contrast, scale, proportion, consonance and dissonance, rhythm, and then breaking the rhythm, right? So that's what you're trying to do. Now, this idea of cliche, what's a cliche? And a cliche is an overused idea. And there's this book, it's out of print now, so it's really hard to get a copy of it. But if you ever find a copy, I would suggest that you snag one because on Amazon it's quite pricey. It's called A Smile in the Mind. And it's a book, believe it or not, about conceptual thinking, about creating hybrid meanings. When you put 1 and 1 together equals 11. And so there's a segment in the back, and what they do is they tap into some of the leading thought leaders in design, and they ask them about advice or tips that they would share. One particular person, and I'm spacing on his name right now, shared this idea about a cliche. He said, when I was coming up through school, my professors would say, don't do that, that's a cliche. So cliche was bad. So he did what he could to avoid cliches. And later on in life, he started to realize something. Cliches aren't bad, it's just how we use them. He says cliches are very useful in that everyone is familiar with what they mean. You don't have to teach people the meaning of an image or a symbol because they already know it. So he says that a cliche is a bankrupt idea. It's been overused. So he says, make a deposit. Take something familiar and change some part of it, and then it becomes new again. One of my friends, a professor at Art Center, her name's Petrula Vrontikis. I didn't know it at the time, but she wrote this line, and I love it. And the line is, practice safe design. Use a concept. It takes a very familiar line, which is practice safe sex, use a condom, and she just changed 2 words, practice safe design, use a concept. And when we see that and we see something familiar made unfamiliar, we smile in our mind. And that's what you're trying to do. And so designers who tap into this visual language, these cliches, these ubiquitous symbols, are able to get us to look at something old in new ways. I'll give you an example. Way back when the iPod was launched, there was a very iconic ad campaign featuring young, very athletic people dancing and shaking around, and they were in silhouette against a bright colored background. And the only thing you can see was a white iPod with white earbuds, something that was quite unique to Apple at that time. And then they would release a series of posters, bus boards, and they would just glue them everywhere. And you would see a bright color, a silhouette, and you would see iPod. So that's a visual language that's very well known. It starts to become ubiquitous and part of the urban landscape. So some creative people wanted to bring awareness to what was happening in the Middle East. So what they did was, instead of using young, hip people dancing and shaking around, they would have people dress and carry AK-47s in silhouette. Instead of saying iPod, it would say Iraq. And that is a lovely example of taking a familiar visual language and changing it just a little bit. And if you want to find more ideas like that, they're collected in a volume called The Design of Dissent. And it's using guerrilla warfare techniques on visual design, hijacking the landscape and the vernacular that we're used to and changing just enough of it so that we sit up and we pay attention. And that's the magic of design. So thank you very much, Emily, for asking that question about cliches. Cliches, again, are bankrupt ideas, but they're very useful because the meanings that are embedded within those, the semiotics, can be unleashed when you combine it with something else. So just make a deposit.
Wow, Dan.
All right, yeah. Go ahead, Kate, sorry.
Yes, we all have to open our mic and thank Chris for being here as late as 10:42 p.m. our time. All right, everyone, open your mic. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris.
Incredible. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chris.